The room was small, almost cramped, with just enough space for a keyboard, a small desk, and a chair that had seen better days. Sheets of music were scattered across every surface, some folded, some torn at the edges, as if they had been carried through years of practice and late-night creativity. The young woman sat at the keyboard, her fingers lightly brushing the keys, testing sounds and melodies. She was quiet, focused, almost as if she were alone in her own little world. Outside the window, the city was alive with noise cars honking, people talking, distant laughter, but inside, it felt like a completely different universe. Here, she could create without interruption, without judgment, without anyone telling her what she could or could not do. Music had been a part of her life for as long as she could remember. Her earliest memories were of sitting on the floor of the living room, listening to the faint hum of her parents' old radio, trying to imitate the sounds with whatever she could find, a book, even the floor itself. Later, when she finally got a proper keyboard, it became her sanctuary. Some people went to gyms or parks to escape. She went to her music. Every note, every chord, every rhythm she practiced felt like a small piece of freedom, a way to speak without words when words were never enough. Despite her talent, she was not someone who sought the spotlight. She performed at local cafes and small community events, but the idea of fame or large audiences never tempted her. For her, music was personal. It was about expression, about feeling alive, about connecting with the deepest parts of herself. Yet, even in her quiet world, life had a way of introducing surprises. And she was about to get one she would never forget. It started with a message, a simple notification on her phone that she almost ignored. Because she had been too busy scribbling lyrics and experimenting with melodies, the message was from a well-known music producer. The kind of person whose name alone carried weight in the music industry, someone she had admired from afar for years. He wrote that he wanted her to record a basic song for a new project. Nothing complicated, just something simple, something easy. At first, she felt a twinge of doubt. A basic song? She whispered to herself, the words almost bitter. She had spent countless hours honing her craft, creating music that told stories, that carried emotion, that could move someone to tears or joy with a single note. The idea of being asked for something basic felt almost like an insult. But then she paused, thought about it carefully, and realized she was looking at it all wrong. This wasn't a dismissal. It was an opportunity. A real chance to work with someone who could help her music reach the world. She accepted the request. The producer gave her the details, keeping it simple, almost minimal. Just a melody, a short set of lyrics, and a basic chord structure. She was instructed not to overthink it, to keep it straightforward, to deliver something predictable and safe. And for a brief moment, she considered following instructions exactly. It would be easy, after all, and it would fulfill the request. But she couldn't ignore the spark inside her that had always pushed her beyond limits. She wanted more than safe. She wanted meaningful. She wanted fire. That night, she began to work. The room seemed to shrink as she leaned over her keyboard, her fingers moving across the keys with a confidence born from years of practice. She hummed softly, testing chords, letting melodies emerge naturally rather than forcing them. She wrote lyrics that felt personal, drawing from experiences and emotions that had never left her since childhood, the quiet moments of doubt, the flashes of joy, the loneliness that sometimes settled like a shadow in her life. Each word carried weight. Each note had intention. She wasn't just writing a song. She was creating a piece of herself, a glimpse of her soul that she had never shown to anyone before. Hours passed without her noticing. The faint glow of her laptop screen was the only light as she adjusted chords, rewrote lines, and experimented with different harmonies. She tried a gentle rhythm, then a slightly faster one, then slowed it again. Sometimes she would stop, take a deep breath, and play a single note over and over until it sounded just right. Her cat, the only other presence in the room, watched curiously from a corner, tail flicking, as if sensing the intensity of her focus. By the time she paused to look at the clock, it was nearly dawn. The city outside was quiet now, and for the first time, she felt a sense of satisfaction mixed with exhaustion. She had taken a simple request and turned it into something that felt alive, something that carried energy and emotion. She knew it was good, not just good enough to meet the producer's expectations, but something that could surprise, even astonish. The next day, she sent her draft to the producer. She felt a flutter of nerves as she hit the send button, wondering how he would react. Would he understand what she had done? Would he appreciate the depth, or would he find it too much for a basic song? She tried not to overthink it. But the anticipation gnawed at her throughout the day. When she finally received a response, her heart raced. The producer wrote back almost immediately, expressing surprise and excitement. He hadn't expected something like this. The song was no longer basic. It had personality, it had strength, it had presence. He asked if she could come in for a recording session, praising her creativity and attention to detail. For her, it was a moment of quiet triumph. She had always believed in her abilities, even when no one else did. She had spent years developing her skills in a small room with only her music as company. And now, for the first time, someone with influence in the industry was recognizing her talent. It was validation, yes. But it was also something more. It was a reminder that following her instincts, trusting her creativity, and pouring herself into her work could lead to opportunities she had only dreamed of. As she prepared for the recording session, she felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. She knew that this could be the start of something bigger, but she also understood that it was still just a first step. She would need to give everything she had in the studio to transform her vision into sound that could be captured perfectly. Yet, despite the pressure, there was a calm confidence in her. She had prepared herself for this moment through countless nights of practice. Through moments of doubt and determination, through the quiet discipline of loving her craft without expectation, she thought about her journey, how she had started, with simple tunes on a wooden floor, and how far she had come, to a point where her music could be heard, appreciated, and celebrated. She realized that talent alone wasn't enough. It was dedication, passion, and the willingness to take risks that made the difference. She had taken what could have been a simple assignment and turned it into an expression of herself, something true and powerful. The night before the session, she barely slept. She practiced one last time, adjusting melodies, refining lyrics, and making sure every note resonated with emotion. Her mind was alive with possibilities, imagining how the song would sound when recorded, how it might touch someone listening, even if just one person. Music had always been her voice, her way of connecting, and now, for the first time, it might reach beyond the walls of her room, beyond her small circle of friends and family. When she finally laid her head down to rest, she felt a sense of peace mixed with anticipation. The next day, she would step into a professional studio, and for the first time, her music would leave the confines of her private world. She knew that whatever happened next, she had already succeeded in the most important way. She had stayed true to herself, followed her instincts, and delivered a piece of work that was more than basic. It was her. The first part of her story ends here, at the edge of possibility. She had taken the first step, and though the journey ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. She was ready to show the world what she could do, and no one, not even those who asked for something simple, could underestimate her again. The morning sun peeked through the blinds, casting soft lines of light across the keyboard and scattered sheet music. The young woman sat on the edge of her chair, taking deep breaths, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. Today was the day she would step out of her small room and into a professional studio. She had never done anything like this before. She had performed at small cafes, in front of a handful of strangers. But a studio meant cameras, microphones, sound engineers, and the pressure of creating something that could be heard by thousands, maybe millions. Her hands shook slightly as she packed her bag with headphones, a notebook full of lyrics, and her favorite pen. Every detail mattered. The streets were alive with movement as she walked toward the studio. People rushed past her, carrying coffees, briefcases, and backpacks. She noticed how ordinary the city seemed from the outside, yet inside her, everything felt extraordinary. She was about to enter a space where creativity ruled, where her music could finally find a voice beyond her own walls. She reminded herself that this was what she had been preparing for. All the countless nights of practice, the endless writing and rewriting, the moments of frustration when nothing sounded right, all of it had led her here. When she arrived at the studio, the atmosphere was different from anything she had imagined. It was large, almost cavernous, with thick walls to block out every sound from the outside world. The air smelled faintly of coffee and equipment, a mix that somehow made her feel alive. Engineers moved between consoles and computers, adjusting levels and checking microphones. The producer greeted her warmly, shaking her hand and offering a smile that made her feel at ease. Despite the nerves, there was something comforting in the familiarity of people who understood music in the way she did. The producer explained the plan for the session. "We want to keep it simple," he said, echoing the original request, but she could see the curiosity in his eyes. He was expecting something straightforward, predictable, and safe. She smiled politely, listening carefully, but inside, a fire burned. She had no intention of delivering something simple. This song was more than a request. It was an opportunity to show who she really was as she sat in front of the microphone. Headphones on, the sound of her own breathing amplified through the speakers. She felt a sudden wave of self-doubt. What if she went too far? What if her creativity was too much for a basic song? But then she reminded herself of the countless hours she had invested in her craft. The nights when she had stayed awake, trying to find the perfect note. The moments when she had almost given up, but pushed herself anyway. This was not the time to be cautious. She started with the first notes softly at first, letting them fill the room. The sound engineers leaned in, listening closely, and she could feel the energy shifting. What had started as a quiet, tentative performance quickly grew into something more dynamic. She played with tempo and rhythm, adjusting chords in real time, letting her instincts guide her fingers. Every movement felt natural, effortless, as if the music was flowing through her rather than coming from her. The lyrics were personal, drawn from memories she had tucked away. She sang about moments of doubt, of quiet perseverance, of small victories that often went unnoticed. Her voice carried emotion that she hadn't realized could be heard so clearly. Sometimes she would pause, take a breath, and repeat a line, searching for the perfect expression of feeling. The producers and engineers watched in silence, their surprise evident. They hadn't expected anything like this. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. She experimented with harmonies, trying subtle shifts that added depth to the melody without overwhelming it. She layered her voice in ways she hadn't dared before, creating echoes and resonances that seemed to fill the studio itself. The song was transforming with every take, evolving from a simple request into something vibrant, alive, and unmistakably her own. The producer finally spoke, his voice calm but filled with admiration. "This is not what I expected. It's more. It's really something." She smiled softly, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She had hoped for recognition, but hearing it out loud from someone she respected made the moment feel tangible, almost magical. For the first time, she realized that her music could touch others in ways she had only imagined in her private room. She took a short break. Stepping away from the microphone and stretching her fingers, her legs ached slightly from sitting so long, but the excitement kept her awake. She sipped water and looked around the studio, observing the equipment, the mixing boards, cables running across the floor. Everything was intimidating and fascinating at once, yet she felt at home here, in this space where music mattered more than anything else. When she returned to the microphone, she felt renewed energy. She decided to add subtle changes she had thought of during the break, a soft piano overlay, a small, percussive rhythm with her fingertips on the keyboard, a faint hum of background harmony. Each addition was small, almost imperceptible, but together they added layers that gave the song life. She could sense the song breathing, as if it had taken on a personality of its own. The hours continued, and the session stretched into the evening. She lost track of time, fully absorbed in the creation of her music. At some point, she noticed the engineers whispering among themselves, nodding and smiling. She realized that her instincts, her quiet persistence, had captured something unexpected. The basic song request had become a canvas for expression, She was painting it with everything she had learned over the years. As the final notes rang out, the room fell silent. The producer and engineers looked at each other, almost unable to believe what they had heard. There was a moment of stillness, a pause heavy with admiration and wonder. The young woman removed her headphones, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. She had done it. She had transformed a simple assignment into something unforgettable. After the recording, the producer asked if she would be willing to do a few more takes, exploring variations that she hadn't tried before. She agreed eagerly, her creativity still flowing, her confidence growing. She added slight changes, subtle inflections, emotional flourishes that made each take feel unique. Every note, every word, every pause was intentional. She realized that this was not just about following instructions. It was about sharing her voice, her story, her essence with anyone who would listen. By the end of the day, the young woman was exhausted. But the exhaustion was different from anything she had felt before. It was the kind that comes after giving your all, after pushing boundaries, after creating something meaningful. She packed her things, thanked the producer and engineers, and stepped out of the studio into the cool night air. The city felt different somehow. It was the same streets, the same lights, the same people, but she had changed. She had shared a piece of herself with the world, and in doing so, she had discovered a new depth to her own abilities. Walking home, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the quiet moments in her small room to the intense energy of the studio, she had learned something important. Talent alone was not enough. It was courage, persistence, and the willingness to take risks that allowed her to truly shine. She thought about the basic song request that had seemed so simple at first. It had been more than just a request. It had been a test, a chance to see what she could do when given an opportunity and left to her own devices. She had passed that test in a way that surprised even herself. That night, back in her room, she sat at the keyboard once more, playing the melody softly. The music was familiar, yet different. It carried the memory of the studio, the echoes of her own voice, the energy of the day. She smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning. Opportunities like this did not come often, and she intended to make the most of every one. The experience had taught her to trust her instincts, to believe in her abilities, and to embrace the unexpected. The next morning, messages started arriving. People had begun to hear the track in preview form, and reactions were immediate. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers praised the depth, the emotion, the energy of the song. The young woman read each message quietly, a small smile on her face. She realized that her music, once confined to the walls of her room, was starting to touch lives. She felt a sense of connection she had never known before, a confirmation that her passion, her perseverance, and her authenticity could make a difference. Even as she enjoyed the recognition, she knew she could not stop here. There was more to explore, more to create, more to give. The experience in the studio had opened doors, not just in the music industry, but within herself. She had discovered strengths she hadn't fully recognized, creativity that thrived under pressure, and a voice that demanded to be heard. As the day ended and she prepared for rest, she felt a quiet satisfaction. She had stepped into a world that had once seemed intimidating, had faced her nerves, and had come out stronger, more confident, and more alive. The journey of the song had begun with a basic request, but it had evolved into a revelation. A reminder of what could happen when talent meets courage, when opportunity meets preparation, and when passion meets determination. Part 2 of her story closes here. With the young woman poised on the edge of even greater possibilities, she had taken her first real step into the larger world of music, and the fire she had ignited in the studio was only beginning to burn. The road ahead was uncertain, but she was ready. She had found her voice, and nothing would stop it from being heard. The song had been recorded, but the young woman knew the journey was far from over. The studio session had ended hours ago, and now the track was in the hands of the producer and the sound engineers. She felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety as she waited for feedback. She knew the song had power, but she also knew that once it was out of her hands, it would be judged, analyzed, and compared. Every emotion she had poured into the notes and lyrics now depended on the perception of others. That evening, she sat in her small room, the keyboard before her, though she didn't play. Her thoughts kept returning to the studio, the microphones, the lights, the intense focus she had felt while singing. She replayed the moments in her mind, remembering how her fingers had danced over the keys, how her voice had shifted with each note, how she had felt the song breathe under her hands. She smiled softly, a quiet satisfaction growing inside her. She had done something real, something authentic, something that carried her own essence. Her phone buzzed, and she saw a message from the producer. Her heart raced as she opened it. He had listened to the first mix and wrote that he was stunned. The song had exceeded every expectation. It wasn't just good, it was exceptional. He asked if she would be available for a video call the next day to discuss how the track could be promoted, to explore potential collaborations, and even to perform live at an upcoming showcase. She stared at the message, disbelief and joy mixing together. It was one thing to imagine recognition, another to have it reach her in a tangible way. The next day, she sat in front of her laptop, adjusting the webcam and taking deep breaths. She had never been on a professional video call like this before, speaking with multiple people in the music industry at once. But when the call began, the tension melted away. The producer greeted her warmly, praising the song again, and introduced her to other team members, people who worked in promotion, sound mixing, and event management. They asked her questions about her creative process, her inspirations, and her goals. She answered honestly, her voice steady, even as she felt her heartbeat race. As the call continued, one of the team members suggested using social media to create a teaser for the song, to reach audiences quickly and build anticipation. The idea excited her. She had always shared bits of her music online, but now it felt different. Now, her music was being presented to the world in a professional way, reaching beyond her small circle of listeners. She realized the power of connection, that through music, she could reach people she had never met, touch emotions she could never predict, and create experiences that would live in the hearts of others. The next few days were a whirlwind. She recorded additional takes, added small tweaks to the track, and worked closely with the team to refine every detail. She discovered that music production involved much more than just playing and singing. It was about timing, layering, balancing sound levels, choosing the right background harmonies, and understanding how subtle changes could make a song feel completely different. She learned quickly, absorbing every piece of advice, experimenting with different ideas, and trusting her instincts. As the song neared completion, anticipation built. She watched as snippets of the track were shared with small focus groups. People who gave honest feedback about what moved them and what could be improved. Each comment mattered to her, but she also recognized that not every opinion would align with her vision. She listened, considered, and made decisions carefully, always keeping the integrity of the song at the forefront. She wanted the music to feel alive, not forced or artificial. Finally, the day came for the song to be officially shared with the public. She sat quietly in her room, headphones on, listening to the final version. Every note was perfect. Every word carried the emotion she had intended, and yet a small part of her felt nervous. The song was no longer hers alone. It was now something that others could hear, interpret, and respond to. She knew that once it was out there, she would have no control over the reactions. When the first wave of responses came, they were immediate. Friends texted her, strangers messaged her on social media, and people she didn't know shared the song across platforms. Comments poured in, praising the emotion, the melody, the depth, and the unexpected energy of the track. People were calling it surprising, powerful, and captivating. She read each message carefully, savoring the words, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. She had always believed in her abilities, but hearing it confirmed in the voices of others was a completely new experience. The attention grew quickly. Bloggers, music reviewers, and small online publications started noticing the song. Some highlighted the contrast between the simplicity of the request and the intensity of the final product. Others commented on her ability to transform a basic idea into something emotionally rich. The young woman realized that the song had not only reached audiences, but had also begun to create a narrative about her creativity, her persistence, and her unique voice. Amidst the growing attention, she remained grounded. She knew that recognition was exciting, but it was not the purpose of her music. The song had started as a simple request, but she had poured herself into it because she wanted to create something meaningful, something that could touch hearts. The praise was gratifying. It was also a reminder of why she made music in the first place, the connection it allowed her to feel with the world. The ability to express what could not be said in words alone. Soon, opportunities began to follow. A small local venue invited her to perform the song live, promising an intimate setting where she could connect with listeners face to face. She agreed eagerly, both nervous and excited. Performing in a studio or at home was one thing. Performing in front of an audience, even a small one, was another challenge entirely. She practiced relentlessly, rehearsing every note, every line, every pause, making sure that her emotions came through authentically. When the day of the live performance arrived, she felt a wave of anticipation unlike anything she had experienced. She arrived at the venue early, familiarizing herself with the stage, the microphone, and the acoustics. The small audience began to gather, chatting quietly, unaware of the depth they were about to witness. She took a moment alone, closing her eyes, letting the quiet calm her nerves. She reminded herself that music was her language, her way of sharing herself, and that this was her moment to speak. As she began to play, the room seemed to fall silent. Her fingers glided over the keys. Her voice carried every emotion she had poured into the song. People listened intently, leaning forward, captivated by the unexpected energy and depth. Every note resonated, every word struck a chord, and she could feel the connection growing with each measure. For the first time, she realized that her music had a power she had only imagined, a power to bring strangers together, to evoke emotions, to create a shared experience. After the performance, people approached her, praising not only the song but the emotion she conveyed. Some shared stories of how certain lines had touched them personally, how the melody had brought back memories or feelings they had not felt in years. The young woman listened quietly, humbled, realizing that her music had become more than a personal expression. It had become a bridge between her experiences and the lives of others. The success of the live performance led to further invitations. She was asked to record additional songs, to collaborate with other artists, and to share her story with wider audiences. Each opportunity felt like a new chapter unfolding, a chance to grow, to explore, and to inspire. She embraced these moments with gratitude and determination, knowing that her journey was only beginning. Yet, even as the attention and opportunities grew, she remained focused on the core of her craft. She continued to practice in her small room, to write songs that spoke to her, and to experiment with melodies and rhythms that challenged her creativity. She understood that recognition was fleeting, but the dedication to her art was lasting. She wanted every note, every lyric, every chord to be true to her vision, to reflect the depth of her experiences, and to carry the authenticity that had defined her journey from the start. Part 3 of her story ends with a clear understanding. The song that began as a basic request had become a turning point in her life. It had opened doors, connected her with audiences, and revealed the power of authenticity, courage, and passion. She had faced uncertainty, embraced her instincts, and created something that resonated far beyond her expectations. And while the journey was far from over, she knew she had taken steps that would shape her future, guiding her toward even greater possibilities and a deeper understanding of her own voice. The days that followed the release of her song felt surreal. The young woman woke up each morning to notifications from every corner of her phone, messages, emails, social media alerts, and comments from people she didn't even know. Every time she picked up her phone, there were new reactions, new expressions of admiration, and even stories from strangers who had felt touched by her music. It was overwhelming at first. She had spent so many years in a quiet world of her own creation that the sudden attention was like stepping into a completely different universe. She took a deep breath and reminded herself to focus. This was not just about the rush of attention. It was about connecting with people through music, about sharing the emotion and truth she had poured into every note. She read each message carefully, smiling at the ones that resonated with her, and feeling humbled by the ones that spoke to others' personal experiences. Some people had written about moments in their lives that her lyrics mirrored perfectly, as if she had been able to put into words what they had never been able to express. Others praised the intensity of the melody, how it seemed to rise and fall like waves, carrying their hearts along with it. As her song continued to spread, the young woman began to receive invitations to participate in interviews and podcasts. People wanted to know the story behind the song, what had inspired it, how she had created it. She was nervous at first, unsure if she could explain something so personal without losing its authenticity. But each time she spoke, she realized that sharing her experiences added a new layer of connection. People were not just listening to her music, they were connecting with her as a person, with her journey, her struggles, and her triumphs. The producer suggested that she create a short video to accompany the song. It didn't need to be elaborate, it's just something that captured the essence of the music and allowed her personality to shine through. She agreed, feeling both excitement and pressure. She wanted the video to reflect her vision, her creativity, and the story she had woven into the song. For days, she experimented with ideas, arranging simple settings, natural lighting, and subtle visuals that would enhance the mood without overshadowing the music. When the video was finally released, it was met with overwhelming enthusiasm. Viewers praised not only the song, but also the authenticity of her presence on camera. She didn't rely on flashy effects or dramatic gestures. She let the music speak, letting her expressions and movements flow naturally with the rhythm and emotion. People commented on the raw beauty of her performance, how it felt like she was singing directly to them, and how the music had the power to evoke memories and feelings long forgotten as the weeks passed. The young woman's song began to gain traction on streaming platforms. Playlists included it, curators recommended it, and more people discovered her music every day. She started receiving messages from other artists and producers interested in collaborations. Invitations to perform at small shows and intimate venues arrived as well. Each opportunity felt like a step forward, a chance to share her music with more people, and she embraced them eagerly. Despite the growing recognition, she remained grounded. She understood that fame could be fleeting, and that the true value of her work lay in its ability to connect, inspire, and resonate. She continued to practice daily, refining her skills, writing new lyrics, and exploring melodies that felt genuine. Each song she created carried a piece of her experiences, emotions, and reflections. She wanted her audience to feel what she felt, to experience the same vulnerability, strength, and hope that she poured into her music. The attention she received also brought challenges. There were moments when she felt pressure to replicate the success of her first song, to meet expectations that sometimes felt overwhelming. She realized that not every comment or opinion would be positive, and that criticism could be both constructive and discouraging. Yet she learned to navigate it with grace. She focused on what mattered most: her creativity, her passion, and her authenticity. She reminded herself that music was not about pleasing everyone, but about expressing truth, connecting hearts, and telling stories that mattered. One evening, she received an invitation to perform at a music showcase in a nearby city. It was an event that would feature multiple artists, each presenting their original work to an audience that included industry professionals, critics, and fans. She felt a mix of nerves and excitement. The showcase represented an opportunity to demonstrate her growth, her ability to perform live, and her commitment to her art. She practiced tirelessly in preparation, rehearsing every note, refining every lyric, and imagining the energy of the audience as she played. When the day of the showcase arrived, she entered the venue early. Observing the stage, the lighting, and the instruments, she felt a familiar wave of nervous anticipation. But she reminded herself that she had been preparing for this moment for years. The audience began to arrive, filling the seats with murmurs and conversations. Some faces were familiar from online interactions. Others were completely new. She took a deep breath and focused on the music, letting it guide her through the performance. As she began to play, the room fell quiet. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with confidence. Her voice carried the emotion of the song. She felt the connection between herself and the audience deepen with each passing moment. People leaned forward, listening intently, captivated by the authenticity and intensity of her performance. The song that had started as a simple request had transformed into an experience that could be felt by everyone. Present, the energy in the room was palpable. After the final note, the audience erupted in applause. She felt a rush of gratitude and pride, a deep sense of fulfillment that came from sharing her music so openly. People approached her afterward, sharing their experiences, expressing admiration, and thanking her for creating something so moving. She realized that her music had the power to inspire, to comfort, and to unite. It was no longer just her own expression, it had become a shared experience, a bond between her and those who listened. Following the showcase, her opportunities continued to expand. She received invitations to collaborate with other artists, to record new tracks, and to perform at additional venues. Each invitation was a chance to explore new aspects of her creativity, to challenge herself, and to grow as an artist. She embraced each opportunity, knowing that the journey was ongoing, that there was always more to learn, more to express, and more hearts to reach. Amidst the growing recognition, she took time to reflect on her journey. She remembered the countless hours spent in her small room, the moments of doubt, and the quiet determination that had kept her going. She realized that the success of the song was not just a result of talent, but also of perseverance, courage, and authenticity. Every note, every lyric, every emotion had been shaped by her experiences, and it was that truth that resonated with others. She also recognized the importance of balance. While opportunities and attention were exciting, she needed to remain true to herself, to prioritize her creative process, and to maintain the integrity of her music. She continued to set aside time each day for writing, practicing, and exploring new ideas. She understood that growth as an artist required dedication, discipline, and a willingness to take risks. Each day was an opportunity to refine her craft, to discover new expressions, and to deepen her connection with her audience. As the weeks turned into months, her song continued to make an impact. People shared it with friends, family, and colleagues, spreading its message of emotion, authenticity, and passion. She received messages from listeners who said the song had helped them through difficult times, inspired them to pursue their own dreams, or simply brought them joy. Each message was a reminder of why she created music in the first place: the power to touch lives, to create connection, and to express what words alone could not. The young woman understood that her journey was evolving. She had started with a basic song request, something that seemed simple at the time, but it had become a catalyst for growth, recognition, and self-discovery. The experience had taught her to trust her instincts, embrace challenges, and follow her passion even when the outcome was uncertain. She realized that every opportunity, no matter how small, could be transformed into something extraordinary with dedication and authenticity. Looking ahead, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that her music had the potential to continue growing, to reach wider audiences, and to inspire even more people. But she also knew that success was not only measured by recognition or popularity, it was measured by the ability to remain true to herself, to create from a place of honesty, and to connect with others through the universal language of music. Part 4 of her story concludes with the young woman standing at a turning point. The song that began as a simple request had become a defining moment, opening doors, building connections, and revealing the strength of her own voice. She had learned that authenticity, courage, persistence could transform even the smallest opportunity into something remarkable. And while the road ahead remained uncertain, she was ready to continue her journey, guided by the passion, determination, and fire that had carried her this far. The young woman had come a long way. From the small room where she first practiced her music in silence, her song, which had started as a basic request, had transformed her life in ways she could never have imagined. Yet, despite the attention, the opportunities, and the praise, she remained grounded, focused on what had always mattered most: her music, her expression, and the connection it allowed her to form with others. Even now, months after the song's release, she would often sit quietly at her keyboard, letting the familiar keys guide her thoughts. She found comfort in the routine of creation, in the simple act of exploring melodies, lyrics, and harmonies. She understood that the world outside could be overwhelming: the messages, the interviews, the invitations, but in this small space, she could reflect, experiment, and dream. It was here that her music began, and it was here that it continued to grow, nurtured by dedication and passion. Life had changed in many ways. She was no longer just a quiet, talented musician hidden in her room. She had performed on stages, spoken to fans, and collaborated with artists she had once admired from afar. She had learned to navigate the demands of the music industry, understanding how to balance creativity with professionalism. Every opportunity that came her way was a test, a challenge, and a chance to grow, just as an artist. But as a person, despite the success, she remained deeply aware of the responsibility her music carried. People had connected with her song on a personal level, some sharing stories of heartbreak, struggle, hope, and joy. She realized that her voice had the power to touch hearts, to evoke emotions, and to inspire action. Each listener brought their own experiences to the music, and in return, the music became a part of their lives. She felt humbled by the trust and openness that her audience had offered. She also reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the countless hours of practice in her small room, the moments of frustration when nothing sounded right, and the nights when she had almost given up. She remembered the first message from the producer, asking for a basic song, and how it had sparked a fire inside her. That simple request had become a turning point, teaching her to trust her instincts, take risks, and create something true to herself. Every note she played since then carried a piece of that lesson, a reminder that opportunity often comes disguised as something ordinary. As she continued to create, she began to explore new directions in her music. She experimented with different genres, instruments, and styles, always keeping authenticity at the core. She collaborated with other artists, learning from their experiences and sharing her own insights. Each collaboration was a chance to grow, to challenge herself, and to expand her musical language. Yet, no matter how ambitious or experimental her projects became, she always returned to the simple truth that had guided her from the start. Music was about emotion, connection, and honesty. Opportunities continued to flow in. She was invited to perform at larger venues, participate in festivals, and even contribute to projects for charitable causes. Each experience offered new challenges and rewards, teaching her the value of preparation, adaptability, and resilience. She discovered that performing live brought a unique energy, a direct exchange of emotion between herself and the audience that could never be replicated in a studio. Each time she stepped onto a stage, she felt the weight of responsibility, but also the exhilaration of sharing her art in its purest form. With each performance, each recording, and each new creation, she gained confidence in her abilities. She had learned to trust herself, to rely on her instincts, and to embrace the uncertainty that came with pursuing a creative path. The fear of failure, once so overwhelming, had transformed into a source of motivation, a reminder that growth and innovation often require stepping beyond comfort zones. She realized that success was not defined by popularity or recognition alone, but by the courage to remain true to her vision.